Hi, I'm Brooke Morales, and today we're going to paint this sky right here. And let's go ahead and dive on in. It is November 2nd, 2024, and I'm going to paint today's sky, my official sky, even though I did actually paint a sky a little while earlier today while out on a jog. So let's begin. I'm going to start by putting in my weather data here. If you're new to this, what I'm doing is I paint the sky every single day. I've been doing this for almost technically over 2 years now, but more formally 2 years now. And on the backs of these cards, I typically write a gratitude as well about something that happened specific to that day. But I always begin by filling out the card with the weather data. And what this is a 3x3 piece of harsh cold press paper that I've masked off with some 3M masking tape. All right, so without any further ado, today is November 2nd, 2024. I'm getting this information off of my watch. It is 5:31 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It is 65 degrees Fahrenheit with winds of 8 miles an hour from the northwest. And conditions are about 80% cloud cover today. And I'm facing south at the moment, so I get all of that in there. And watercolor sock and my little dropper. So before I begin painting, I find it helpful to pre-wet any of the paints I think that I might use. So I'm getting some Indanthrone here, Cobalt. This is Cerulean. A little bit of Cerulean. And let's see, some neutral tint today. I'm seeing a little bit of warmth in some of the clouds. So I'm going to get a little bit of purple magenta in here. And as I'm painting this, the sky might quickly shift. The clouds are shifting, but the colors are going to shift a little bit more soon because we're heading into sunset in my region. I'm also going to pre-wet my paper. Sometimes I do that with the dropper. Sometimes I just do it with getting my brush wet. Now, a lot of times I like to use my flat brush, but because today just has so many clouds, I'm going to go ahead and use my large pointy brush. I believe this is a size 12, and I am pre-wetting it. Let me see if I can just move this here. I don't want to tip it over. I'm going to go ahead and move that off camera. And I start by just getting some clear water onto my little card. Okay. Now my process for this is I like to see about where I'm going to leave certain white areas for the clouds that are brightest for those highlights, but I'm also looking at the variety of blues. And what I'm seeing right now is kind of a mix of Cerulean toward the horizon. I'm going to go real loose on this, and I'm going to adjust these as I continue onward. So I'll walk you through what I'm doing here. First, I'm laying in the main colors that I'm seeing as they tilt. Now, if I had a pure blue sky day, I would be layering this a little bit more intentionally, but I want to give some choppiness to this because I will be lifting out a lot of this for color. I also want to make sure that I get enough of the background color here at the onset, because once I start bringing out my clouds, it is going to be difficult to then get that blue in. So I want to make sure that whatever depth of blue I need, I establish it right away. Okay, now we're going to start working backward for the clouds, and for that, I'm going to use some tissue. I'm looking at the basic cloud shapes. I'm seeing those big puffy clouds and little spots in between for the blue sky, and then gray on those. So first I'm going to blot out the cloud shapes using varying intensity of how hard I push. And then we'll come back and add in the gray toward the end. So first we want to get this blue out. Now some colors stain the paper immediately, a little faster, or they set in with more intensity than something like a cobalt. I don't know if you can notice this, but the cobalt clouds are going to come out a little bit more easily. And I'm noticing right now, I had mentioned that I predict we're going to see a shift with the changing colors of it getting more like a sunset, and it's starting right now. Okay. Just taking more of this tissue, forming it into the shape. I love tissue for this. I almost always, I want to say always, I almost always have a piece of this in my pockets if I'm painting. The problem with that is sometimes I forget to take them out before I put my pants in the wash. And then we have laundry full of tissue bits. So I feel terrible when that happens. I always try to police those pockets, make sure that I'm not throwing anything into the wash that way. But it does happen sometimes. Okay, we have the white spots out. Now, I want to continue to work quickly by lifting out these clouds. What I've done is I've essentially dried, not bone dry, but dried this paper behind it. If I were to go and put the gray parts of the clouds, the shadows, on here right now, they'd have a really hard edge. And what we're seeing with these clouds is that there's no hard edge on these. So I'm going to pre-mix the gray that I would like with variations to that gray based on kind of where I'm seeing color. And then before I put that gray down, I'm going to use this other brush to re-wet those sections. I could also just spray it with like a little spray thing, but I'll just be re-wetting it with a brush. So to make the clouds today, I'm going to take a little bit of Indanthrone. It's going to give me a deeper blue. And a little bit goes a long way. Same thing with neutral tint. Neutral tint, a little bit goes a long way. Now I'm not going to apply this at this intensity directly to the paper. I'm also seeing where we've got almost like a golden hue to some of these clouds, which was not present just a few minutes ago. So I'm going to take a little bit of yellow ochre, which works really well with skies and usually doesn't green up as much as some other colors I have tested for warmth. Okay, so I'm just pre-mixing these colors. I'm also going to take some of this gray right here, and I'm going to make a warm version of it. So I'm transferring it over, and then I'm going to take a tiny bit of this pink and mix that. So as you can see, I'm prepping the shadow colors before I start putting in the shadows. Okay, let me make sure that this is clean. So I'm cleaning this brush right here. And I'm going to now put in some additional water so that when I lay in those cloud shadows, they won't have like a hard edge. They'll have a nice soft bleeding edge to them. Okay, now to the smaller brush, and I'm going to begin with actually my lightest shadows with this yellow ochre. Well, not shadows, those are like warm highlights. And I'm putting these in just as I'm seeing them in the moment. And this is the thing about painting live skies, is they are changing every moment. You can see just the coloration shifting back and forth. And so what we're doing is we're just trying to give the gestalt of it with as well as we can, approximation of the sky. Picking up a little bit of these warm shadows here, letting them just dance into the water. Wherever we have a hard edge that we don't want, we're just going to get some clean water here. Put that in over like this. And soften that up too. Okay, coming back in, getting some of this darker color now. And coming over as I see these clouds. Now it's really important to me as well that I don't spend too much time on this because, as I had mentioned a moment ago, This is changing really fast, and I want the intention of this to be as close to when I started as I can. So to give that moment justice, but to not take it so far that it becomes something wholly different than where we began. So we're giving it a little bit of this warmth. We're giving it a little bit of this darker shadow here. Kind of going across. Don't know if the video that I'm recording right now will pick this up because I can only fit so much, but at the lower part, near the horizon more, I have these bits of clouds that are kind of stacked. There we go. Put that down. Let me zoom in a little bit. Actually, that's quite a bit. So what I've done here is there's a little bit of that warmth. There's a little bit of that kind of warmer shadow and cooler shadow. The final part now is I'm going to take an eradicator brush. I'm going to wet this and then dry it. I don't want it to be bone dry, but I also don't want it to be sopping wet. And I'm going to come through and get the final bits of highlights here out of here. And now we're at a point where the paper is starting to dry to a point where it's becoming a little bit more difficult to lift out some of those highlights. And where I'm noticing with some of the drawing that it's maybe drying a little too light. And that's where we were talking earlier. I was sharing about trying to get that blue dialed in ahead of time because it's really hard to go back. So there we go. Let's see. Go like this. And clean that in. I'm going to give this a couple minutes, or not minutes, but moments to dry. Let me dab up the edges first. Now, normally when I'm not doing a demo, I would just stop right here and let everything dry for hours. And then usually in the evening, I come back and I take off the tape and then I write in the weather data at the bottom here. But because of the demo, I like to usually unmask during a demo, just so you can see the end result as well. But let's go ahead and let that dry. And I'll just show you another take, like a fun loose take on skies that I did earlier, which was actually during my jog and in my sketchbook. So I have not drawn skies. I've only painted skies like we've done here. But I thought, you know, it would be fun to, I've seen other people do a much better job of penciling in skies or using pen to show skies. And so I thought, you know, let me try this. Let me get my pen. And at first I wasn't able to take off my gloves. It was a little cold for my hands. So I just started sketching out the clouds and it got a little bit warmer. I was able to take off my gloves and do a little bit of painting. And so I thought this was a very fun sketchbook approach to doing skies today, which was just, you know, a different take. Especially it was helpful too with all of the different kinds of clouds that were present. So did this really just fun take on it. I think I'll try that again in the future. You know, for painting skies for a couple of years now, it is kind of boggles my mind that I haven't tried to sketch skies. I think I got so into the watercolor side of it that that's just my default. And plus with this project, it is like a watercolor sky a day. So I look at it as like, that's the sky. That's the one that I did. All right. I go ahead and move this. And we're going to unmask. Try to save these little pieces of tape when they're not shot and they're usable again. You can get a few uses out of them typically. And now once I take this one off, I'm going to go ahead and write in the weather data. And what's odd is normally, like, this is super rare. Normally Arche does not peel off with the tape. So I don't know if it was just the way that I cut this square, but it's peeling off a little bit on this one. So that's not typical for Arche. It is for this type of sketchbook. When I use the sketchbook and I try to use this tape, it does rip it, or like pick some of it up. So I'd be really careful. Always test your tape ahead of time if you can. That way, if it doesn't take well, you didn't put it on a page that you absolutely loved. All right, I'm gonna get my goniometer and get a pencil, draw a very light line, and I'm going to be careful that when I put my ruler over my paper that I don't push down hard because this paint is actually still a little wet. I'm gonna draw a light guideline here for my weather. And take a pen. This one would not hold up very well for writing the weather data in ahead of time, but I use it afterward. And it's November 2nd, 2024. And we began this at 5:31 p.m. And at that time, it was 65 degrees with winds 8 miles an hour northwest, 80% cloud cover, and I say CC for that. And for this one, like most of my skies, was facing south. Final touch is I like to go through with a kneaded eraser and lift out that little bit of line. Be careful when you do this. Kind of same principle as like let your sky dry. You also want to let your ink dry. So I am jumping in a little bit sooner than I would like to do this, but that is all right. Live a little. This is me living on the edge. Okay. All right, well, here's today's sky. I hope you have an opportunity, if you haven't already, to paint a sky too. Get out there in nature journal. Try to take some time this weekend to do so if you can. Thank you for